far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees.
Welcome to the 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women 2025 Fireside Chat, Series 4, Episode 7. The title for this chat is Black Women in Leadership in Nonprofits. Thank you for joining us to learn and to engage with our 4 amazing panelists, which I will introduce to you shortly. And so I'll begin by saying, who am I? My name is Sylvia Paris. I am the Chief Executive Officer at the Delmore Buddy Day Learning Institute in Nova Scotia, which in terms of First Nation land is Mi'kma'ki. And I know that folks who have come to join this conversation and to be in the learning, you know that we're going to be talking today about the contributions of nonprofits. We're going to be talking about what senior leadership roles have been like for women, what they have experienced, and what it's been like for them to push and to move change. So thank you again for joining us. And I will launch into now the introduction of all of our panelists. And then what we'll do is we'll hear a bit about from them. I'll give you their bio, and then I'm going to invite them to talk a little bit more about themselves, as well as talk about the connections for this overall topic that we're addressing today. So I'm going to start the introductions. Corrine Cohen Sanchez is a PhD candidate and very near the completion of her role to her doctorate degree at the University of Ottawa, a leading advocate for equity in academia. She has co-developed a Black mentorship program, founded the Anti-Racist Student Association, and spearheaded systemic change initiatives for Black and racialized graduate students in Canada. Our second panelist I'll introduce is Lavinia Latham. Lavinia is a high-profile human rights and employment lawyer, law firm owner, and speaker dedicated to empowering leaders and advocating for workplace equity. She is also a content creator, an entrepreneur focused on personal development, resilience, and transformative leadership. Next, Rosemary Powell. Rosemary is the executive director of the Toronto Community Benefits Network, co-founder of the Canadian Building Diversity Institute, and president of Big on Green. With over 20 years of advocacy for social, economic, and environmental justice, she has driven equitable policy development at all levels of government, notably through advancement of the community benefits agreements in policy and practice. And Natasha Ferguson. Natasha is the founder of Ethel Fox Construct Group, a full-service construction and development company located in Toronto that provides distinctive build and design services for residential homeowners. As one of the only female-owned and operated construction companies in Canada, Natasha's company helps to break down barriers for women in construction. Natasha is also an avid supporter of women in the trades and is the founder of a nonprofit organization called A Woman's Work, the first and only skilled trade school for women in Canada that supports the development of women in trades. Natasha has been recognized as one of Canada's top 100 most powerful women and has also been awarded the UBC Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Awards, Startup Canada's Entrepreneur of the Year Award, and the YWCA's Women of Distinction Award. Since launching her company in 2013, Natasha has been featured in more than a dozen media interviews and speaking arrangements, and uses these opportunities to discuss the challenges women and people of color face in the construction industry. Welcome to our four panelists, and I know we're for an exciting conversation. That will be an exchange for their learning and, well, maybe a little dialogue amongst ourselves too. So with no further ado, as the saying goes, I will welcome our first panelist to speak. Karine.
Hi, thank you, Sylvia, for my introduction. So just a little bit about myself. I am a PhD candidate, but as Sylvia mentioned, I submitted and I'm flaunting it all over the place. I didn't get the official title yet, so I still have to respect the protocols in terms of status. I think Sylvia did summarize pretty much what I'm involved in and what I've been doing so far in terms of my role within the Anti-Black Student Association, and as well as the Black Mentorship Program that I co-founded at the university. So yeah, in terms of my role in as the anti-racist, the founder of the Anti-Racist Student Association, that association was founded on a severe need for the invisible voices to be heard through academia specifically. It's a nonprofit organization, and it is through academics at the University of Ottawa to help enable voices that are not heard within the academic regime. And the Black Mentorship Program reflects the same kind of momentum.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on too this kind of phenomena, I guess, that often happens with Black women in particular is that we see the need and we jump to that need, right? And so when you situate the spaces for voices, I want to give a champion for that, and I know I've seen that in the contribution in the bios of other folks on this panel as well. So thank you for that. So Lavinia, I'd invite you in, please.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. A little bit about my background. I've worked with quite a few different nonprofit organizations, registered charities, including Legal Aid Ontario, African Canadian Legal Clinic, Toronto Catholic District School Board, and then, of course, various different community advocacy groups. And so in that work, the work that I do as a lawyer is really related to human rights, in addition to workplace law. And when I say workplace law, I'm speaking of workplace investigations, employment litigation as well. And so, being in these various different spaces, of course, now I'm operating my own firm with my partner, Alphonse Latham LLP. But in that work, there is still a place to definitely support nonprofit organizations and to provide resources as it relates to the law where possible. So that's a little bit about the work that I do. And I will absolutely share a little bit more throughout today's presentation. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And the kind of intersection for things. And what they say in full transparency, some of the conference audience folks that we had before was really energized around the connection with human rights and leading in organizations and really being a situated space to champion people's voices. So I already see a bit of a trend coming with us. So there. So thank you for that. And Rosemarie, I'll invite you in.
Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. It's great to be among this panel today of nonprofit leaders. We know that this space is not always easy, but it's work that is meaningful. And, that's why we do the work that we do. As the executive director for the Toronto Community Benefits Network, I started with the organization back in 2016. And one of my first tasks was to finalize negotiations for a community benefits framework with Metrolinx as they were building out the Eglinton Crosstown and then the Finch West LRT. Started right out, with going through a strategic planning process with our Community Labor Coalition, because one of the important things for us as an organization is just the concept of building with trust. And, we recognized that there was a really incredible challenge that was facing us, and we needed to have all the key stakeholders on board. And so we needed to basically, start with them. And we built on close to a decade of community benefits organizing that was happening in neighborhoods all across the city. For good jobs and economic development whenever infrastructure projects were being built. And so we needed to make sure that we had a strong coalition that could really step up and support the communities that have been left out of the economy, Black, Indigenous peoples, racialized peoples, newcomers, and youth. And so we needed to do it together and to walk the journey together. And that was an incredible feat because I'm not a founder. People ask me, if you're a founder of the organization, and no, this organization had already started prior to me, getting involved. And I really needed to have a really high level of respect for that. The foundation for the organization had been created, and people with good minds and good intentions had already thought about the strategy for how to move forward. And coming into this organization and trying to take it to the next level was a really important task that I really needed to step to the plate for. And I think I did. After 10 years, now the organization has truly grown. We've grown into 120 member organizations and groups, a strong collaboration with our labor partners. We now, we moved from about 350 supporters to now over 20 supporters, not just here in Toronto, but we're having impact at the provincial level and at the national level. So I would say that, as Black women in nonprofit leadership roles, we need to lead through an intersectional lens. We combine our experiences both with race and with gender to create inclusive environments and policies. And our lived experience makes us kind of more attuned to the needs of our communities. Often, the personal is political. And, it really, helps us to basically, shape the agenda and move in a way that is more holistic.
Okay, I'm trying not to jump on people's conversations, but I love the phrase "the personal is political." In terms of that and that whole modeling about so a recognition that something that came before, and I felt in your conversation too, feeling a weight of accountability to have it successful and to grow it, and to be continuing to recognize what are the opportunities, what are my strategic approaches. So I think that kind of theme is here already in terms of seeing things, and yet we know as well, and what we had said in the overview of the topic, we know that there's things that we push up again individually as women, Black women CEOs, compensation, balance, and time. And I know we're going to talk more about that, but in this feeling, when we come forward with focus and purpose, I feel like that's kind of a holding, grounding piece for that. So thank you, Rosemary, for that. And Natasha, can I invite you in as well?
Hi, ladies. So happy to be here with this esteemed group, and thank you for having me. So I think I'm probably the youngest here, not in age, but just in experience of nonprofit. I was always sort of a for-profit, running different companies and being CEO of different companies. And when I stepped into nonprofit, I was kind of like a fish out of water. And I had to learn very quickly how things worked as it pertained to, government and nonprofit and working with the community. But my build of a woman's work came from a need and a lived experience, as Rosemary mentioned. I just wasn't I felt discriminated against. I was going for jobs and I wasn't able to get these jobs because, not so much because of the color of my skin, but because I was a woman. And then I also saw the lack of women in the industry and just people of color. We know that there is a lack of people of color in the construction industry and in STEM. I'm in a lot of different industries, but specifically in construction. So I wanted to do something about it. So I raised with my late mother a woman's work. And really what that's about for me is really putting women to work and showing that we can do, the jobs that men can do, but also there is an opportunity as well to create impact in, the three pillars. I say the three pillars. That we're having the troubles that we're having in our province and in our country, which is, labor, housing, environment. And so what I've tried to do through my organization is kind of connect all three by creating an education around construction, finding placement for women. We currently have about 900 women enrolled in our programs. We were actually waitlisted for the next 2 years. And I work very hard and diligently with labor, with employers to employ these women and make them employable so that they can get employed. And we've employed about 50 women. So for me, it's really grassroots. And you know, I'm not up here. I like to say that I'm on the ground and I'm speaking to women and I'm speaking to the newcomers, and I understand what they're going through because that's what I went through. So I think it's important, as leaders of nonprofit, that we really try to connect with our community, not just from a level of, you know, we're going to get funding, we're going to put a program together. You really have to invest yourself into the programs that you put together. You really have to understand your audience and your community. And that's what we try to do. And that's what I've tried to do as a nonprofit. And it hasn't been easy. Yeah, I'm really anxious to talk about a lot of different topics on here today, which are dear to my heart, but also things that I think people on this panel and in the audience need to hear about, I wouldn't say challenges, definitely challenges, doing this type of work and kind of how we can overcome that. So I'm here today to discuss those topics. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll echo your acknowledgement that we've got the right voices on this panel around the table to tackle some of the pieces. And I'm thinking that, you know, we've identified, we're saying Black women, right? And so we've got racial and we've got gender, but then we also have them linked together, right? And that this trying to separate ourselves out, you know, in terms of who we are as a whole person is oftentimes that we're processing through as well. So Katrina, I want to ask to you, noting that you've been in the forefront of advocating for racial equity and for systemic change in academia, so places where we're going to get some influence around policy change and strategic thinking. You've been in academia and beyond. Can you share some of the key challenges that Black women face when trying to step into and sustain leadership roles in the nonprofit sector? And we know the nonprofit sector is growing in terms of its contribution to the economy, right? So probably more eyes on us, if we say it that way. So if you could say something about that for us, and then also talk about how do these challenges intersect with this race, gender, and economic structures?
Absolutely. So as a Black woman, and just making sure this is supposed as a Black woman in nonprofit sector, much like academia you mentioned, we face layers of challenges. So it's shaped by intersectionality of race, gender, and class. We have mustn't forget the economic factor as well. One of the most persistent barriers is structural inclusion. We often are invited into spaces that are obviously not designed for us. And when we do enter it, we are expected to assimilate into these spaces. Okay, I think I'm gonna change my headphones. I think they might be easier. So I'll just give you 2 minutes.
Don't worry. The modeling, do it as we go.
Like this? Is this better?
Thank you.
Okay. I saw everybody going like this. I was like, oh, they can't hear me. So as I was saying, the structural exclusion, like we're often invited in spaces where when it's not designed for us, I think we can all agree on that aspect. And when we enter it, we are expected to assimilate into the organizational structure. That was never meant to reflect our lived realities and our leadership styles. There's also the reality of the concept of polite racism, in which I make reference to in my writing a lot and my work academically, to describe the sublet forms of anti-Black racism that are manifested as coded languages, being constantly second-guessed, having one's contribution minimized or redirected. An example of that is if you are in an environment where the majority of the people in the room are not that do not look like you, and you just say like I've had this happen to me so many times. I say an idea. I'll say, oh, maybe we can do this and we can do that. And that idea gets so dismissed so easily, but somebody else will say the exact same idea and it's highlighted and it's praised and it's supported and the idea and
finances are provided for that idea to be executed, then that has an impact on how we view reality and how we view ourselves. So it has a neurological impact on how we function within those spaces and how we maneuver into these spaces. Black women often find themselves having to overperform just to be seen as competent. And this is the example that is having this need to continuously advocate for ourselves twice as hard and to be respected into these spaces, and also to be seen as a valuable member of contributing into these ideas in different forms. Yet our leadership is perceived as too assertive if we become too, known and we're too intellectual, then we become a threat to the norms that are surrounding us in these areas. So it's finding that balance. And if we are firm in our belief systems, then we're not collaborating enough. So it's like you can't win sometimes into these different factors that we're faced with. And when it doesn't align with the dominant white patriarchal norms, Eurocentric norms, we're a problem. And Dubois does make reference to that about code switching. He talks about it as double consciousness. And there's different ways, if we get into the academic learning, how this is manifested. Now, in terms of economic, the nonprofit sector lends heavily on unpaid labor and unpaid all forms. And this disproportionately impacts Black women specifically, many of whom are balancing community obligations with systematic financial inequalities. This is the reality. Access to funding, mentorship, and institutional supports remains uneven, which limits our ability to scale, impact, and sustain long-term leadership. These are some of the factors, but it does not mean that it's not attainable. So the question does say, like, how do we face these factors? Is finding a way, a means to an end, and how you can create equilibrium. And one of those facets, I would say, is finding your network. One of the grassroots foundation in many of flourishing company, whether it's profit or nonprofit, is finding a network of support, which is accessible and is feasible. So as soon as we have people that are willing to support us, you have to knock on doors and you have to make your voice heard and you have to make yourself visible, although we're in a system that wants to invisibilize us. So it is possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And what I heard in that, yeah, it's kind of the advocating for ourselves and kind of learning and knowing. And Lavina, I'm going to go to you in terms of maybe building on that some more and to maybe talk to us about, you drawing upon your career, being with equity and justice and leadership empowerment. Like, what strategies would you recommend for Black women in nonprofits? So that, to the point that was said, so we're not just surviving, we can be thriving and maybe have the changes that we want to happen be sustained.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So it really depends on the type of nonprofit that you're in. So, when I was at African Canadian Legal Clinic, it was an environment that was really community, right? You have a Black ED, you have other Black lawyers, you have other Black, court justice, youth justice workers. So like the entire organization was like Black led, Black run. And so, I didn't feel the oppression. And I say that quite transparently. There was no oppression, right? You're really in a space that was designed for you to thrive. Moving into white spaces, male-dominated spaces, that is where really the need for the strategies really made itself quite apparent. In some of the things that Karine just mentioned, for example, where you're relaying an idea, you're looking to innovate, you're trying to move the organization forward, and you have people who are either directly standing in your way, or you have others who are taking the idea and running with it as if it were their own. And so what I recommend and what I did do in those spaces was to take advantage of what oftentimes comes with the package. So oftentimes there are benefits. You can speak to a therapist. It could be a Black therapist, someone who you can trust and who you can kind of like get these isms and this oppression off your chest. It's really important because when you're experiencing that type of spiritual warfare every single day, that kind of intellectual warfare every single day, you really do need an outlet. And I think as Black women, we sometimes shoulder it all and we think that we can go through it all and we can handle it. And really and truly, you're not handling it. I mean, if you have skin reactions, I'm not a doctor, but I'm telling you from experience, if you have health conditions or, things are exacerbating, you can't sleep, you find yourself anxious, you're annoyed with people, really short fused with children and partners and anybody who's not within the workplace. All of those are examples of, the toxicity of that environment kind of seeping into your personal world. And so for me, navigating that as a leader in those spaces, it really meant taking care of myself, really prioritizing going to the gym, reading, just taking care of myself outside of this particular role. And then within the organization itself, it also meant taking advantage of things like positive affirmations. So realizing, again, as Black women, we tend to be very A-type and ambitious and forward-thinking and lots of, for me at least, intrinsic senses of control. So when these things are happening, it's not in my mind that, this is happening to me because of something, the organization. It's in my mind that this is happening to me because I'm not performing, and that's not true. And so, those positive affirmations, I think, work to validate the good work that you are indeed doing. But then I also think calling things out and being unashamed to call things out, because at the end of the day, and this is the lawyer hat coming in, like, we do have legislation, we do have case law that protects employees. And so if you're working in your environment, whether it's a leadership position, whether it's diversity, equity, inclusion, whatever the case might be in terms of that leadership role, you have a right to be in a psychologically safe environment. And racism is not psychologically safe, neither is discrimination. And so, being aware of those rules of the organization, they should have policies and procedures, and implementing them in ways that, is very forthright. So in that role, like, I was very good, I think, at definitely looking for people who would be advocates and supporters of the work that I was doing. I was leaning on my community. All of those institutions were actually quite forward facing. And so it's a community that sees the struggle, understands the struggle, and will stand behind you when you are going through things. So I think another piece to it is also not being afraid to speak out. So if something is happening, leaning on your internal networks until you're strong enough to lean on more public ones, I think goes a long way as well. Because part of the victimization, part of the trauma is this feeling that, like, this guiltiness, like, oh, this is happening to me because I'm wrong. And that's not the case. And I think once we shed that guilt and we realize that, this is as real as physical violence, it's the exact same thing. Not because you can't see it means it's not necessarily happening. It is, and it's actually in fact worse. And so the same way we would tell whoever's will listen and whoever can see that, say, for example, hypothetically, I was punched in my face, I think it's the same thing as it relates to, like, racism, oppression, and experiencing those things. So, calling people out, like, in meetings when people are stealing your ideas, I will say, doesn't make you the most popular person, but at the same time, it does make you sleep a little bit better at night, knowing that you're not letting people walk all over you and you know your rights. So, I mean, I can go on about this forever, but those are just some quick tips I think really served me well in those leadership roles, standing on what my values were, my morals, because, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
Yeah, a lovely phrase as well. Thank you for that. And I think what we heard as I go to Rosemary, I think to build from this with the the experience, I said, like, you came into a place and then you had to stabilize it maybe, and then help it grow. And so in this thing points that we heard about, people poaching in on your stories, right? Or when you show your leadership way, then it can be diminished, right? And we get recharacterized based on Black women stereotypes. So there's a lot that people carry into these positions as we try to hold them and be authentic to ourselves and communities. So Rosemary, maybe you could talk about how you build credibility and trust within diverse stakeholders. We have our community, but you're working across communities. We've got staff, donors you'll have to deal with, and board members. So in an environment where Black women are underrepresented in leadership, what's been your experience, and what guidance would you maybe say on to us?
Okay, well, my goal is to see lasting social and economic change. And, so my own personal values and goals are very much aligned with my organization. And, after working within the nonprofit sector for some time in many different roles, ever increasing leadership positions, I was always trying to find a space that was very well aligned with my own personal goals and values. And TCBN really is that. It is an organization that was co-developed, with stakeholders, from all walks, and they have this sense of, ownership to the organization. It's a movement, really, and so my goal, is to make sure that we as people who have been left out of this economy, create those intentional spaces where we have a seat at the decision-making table, where we have agency over our own lives, our own community, and our own legacy into the future. And so in everything that I do, I always want to make sure that I'm in alignment with these different stakeholders, that my board is there as a support, as a guidance for me, to make strategic decisions. I have the best mentors in the world, I tell them all the time. And we're a community labor coalition, 50% community and 50% labor. So it's kind of trying to be in that kind of balance. For me, despite the construction industry being a space where, there is over 150 years of, historic exclusion of peoples from our communities, it is still a place that we've been able to find allies, people internally who wants to see change and who are willing to put themselves out there to help facilitate that change. And we've been able to identify them and to work with them and to bring them into our community allyship. And so I work with an incredible board of directors that supports the work that we do and are looking to make changes internally within their organization. So it really helps to bolster our resolve. Within our membership base of over 120 member organizations and groups in their local communities, these different organizations, have their own constituencies, and they are also nonprofit organizations themselves who are trying to make change locally. And what we've been able to create is really a platform that allows them to take up their own agency and to stand on the platform of community benefits. And we have a collective effort that we're doing together to be able to advance change for social and economic justice. So that's really, really important to us. And then there are the people who we claim to be doing the work for, right? The Black and racialized youth and newcomers and women. We cannot do work for people, right? So we focus on building capacity within the people who are participants of our program so they can advocate for themselves. They can take up their own agencies. When a infrastructure project is being built, you see a big condo going up. Yes, TCBN, who, by the way, are still a very small organization. We probably have 15 staff now, but we have been so effective over these last 10 years because we haven't just relied internally on ourselves. We relied on our board, our members, our partners, and the people themselves who are themselves looking out for the opportunities, and we're providing the tools and resources for them to be able to advocate for themselves. And so that concept of, building a movement at the pace of trust, building those relationships, building our capacity internally to be able to do the work together, we are stronger. And it's really important. And we have to create those spaces internally within the organization and within our ecosystem that will support that, those values and goals. For example, if you talk about mental health, we know that our young people, our Black youth, they are being they're experiencing tremendous complex issues as they're trying to get onto a job site and into an industry that has largely excluded them. Issues of discrimination and racism, and some things that you're not sure if it's discrimination and racism, but it sure looks like it. But it's an industry in general that has always been, challenging, even for the mainstream, workers. So, making sure though that we're having mental health, programs and services in place. We've collaborated with, for example, medical services, a Black-owned organization that provides mental health and physiotherapy and that kind of stuff, right? So that our people can access those resources when they need to. We know that our young people are experiencing challenges on the job site, and we know that there are good people within the industry that wants to do things differently. And so we've partnered with another Black-owned company, Divigo, to help build out equity, diversity, and inclusion strategies and tools that we can share as an app with supervisors and journey persons on the job site, and also the individuals who work in these workplaces. We've implemented mentoring program, and the first year we did an annual retreat. We had 12 people come out. Last year we had 350. So it means that what we're doing is working. The movement is growing, and the people who are coming in, they're not just taking the opportunity and kind of running in with it for themselves, but they're looking back and they're pulling other newcomers into the space with them and supporting them, and them becoming mentors as well. We have women's committee, we have a youth policy table. We need to create those intentional places and spaces that allow people to take up their own agency and to create those structures that will help them to thrive within this very complex and challenging ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I mean, this opportunity to think about having, like I experienced at Delmore Buddy Day, this Black led, Black mandated, Black run, like in terms of our board and stuff. So you've got that kind of nourishment in all aspects. So you see each other in leadership within the staff operations and within the board structure as well. So, I hear this resonate in terms of you carry your values wherever you go, and then you hold those in terms of your organization's accountability, and there's some buffering there in terms of that. So thank you so much for that, Rosemary. And Natasha, I'm thinking that you must have been hearing some things that resonated with you, considering your connection and knowledge as well, and with your Construct group. But if you'd like to say something about that, certainly as well, in terms of the connections with things that we've been hearing here already. I'm particularly interested in inviting you to say a bit about the group, A Woman's Work organization that you have, and how has A Woman's Work organization navigated things like severe underfunding? I've seen that in terms of a challenge was asked about there in terms of finances, and we've heard that mentioned here a couple of times around the economics. So they're affecting Black-led charities in this time. And a note of a stat, given that there's less than 0.1% of all philanthropic funding is allocated to Black-led charities and organizations. Should we say shame, on that? But, the navigating of that. So maybe you could share some of your ideas and perspectives on that with us.
So I think I have a kind of a different perspective, just because, as I mentioned, I do a lot of work on the ground. So, for instance, a lot of the women that have been in my program are living in shelters. They're living in shelters. They've come into this country. They are like a fish out of water. They don't understand the cultural sort of landscape. They don't understand how to get a job or even where to begin. And some of them are coming out of very harsh situations. And so this is what I see every day. And while I agree with Rosemary about having sort of places for people to go, a lot of these participants that I work with are simply looking for a better way of living. and they're looking for jobs. And since I've been in this nonprofit space, I see a lot of things being built, but I don't actually see the loop of, employment and, a better way of living for these participants. And so that's always been my focus. And what I find interesting is that many nonprofit organizations that do the work, or that are doing this type of work, they really focus on the things, to me, that at the end we can, keep, putting together, mentors and everything else. But I can tell you that the women that I work with, they really don't care about mentorship as much as everybody would like to think that they do. And that's because they're in situations where they're being disenfranchised, where they don't know where they're going, and they simply need a paycheck so that they can go on living. So for me, one of the biggest challenges has been, I have a lot of women that sign up for my program, I would say 10 to 20 a day. And where do we put these women? They're not looking for mentorship. They're not looking to sit down and discuss, I mean, we have to be realistic about where we're at in our country, where we're at in our province, what we lack. The gross underfunding of nonprofits, not even by women led, but just Black led. And let's just say, organizations that aren't Black led that are doing very important work, they're not being funded the way that they should. And instead, the funding is going to the larger organizations that may be doing something, but that doesn't result in actually solving the issue and the problems that exist right now for many people. Want to just throw out some stats here. We had 800,000 people come into our province in the last 6 to 7 months. We have nowhere to put them. There's no infrastructure on how we are going to house people. And so my focus has always been, we need to get people employed, but then we also need to get these same people that we've invited into our country building Canada. I can honestly say that coming into the nonprofit sector, I've been very disappointed. I have felt very alone. I have not felt supported by other nonprofits, especially Black-led nonprofits. And that is something that needs to change. We can talk all day about, how we feel disenfranchised as founders, but I really think we need to pull away from that and think about the people that we're actually servicing, because we're really not doing a very good job of servicing them. And you can see it. You can see it, you can feel it. I don't have to tell anybody here what is going on now in our province and in our country. So I think that we need to take an honest look about where we're going, what we're trying to do, and how we're actually trying to impact, and real sustainable impact. That's not only going to impact the participants, but also impact our environment, our social environment, the business environment, because they're all connected. So for me, I think it's important that, yes, there are programs that help to support our community, our women community, but we actually need to find a way to impact that's going to get results. I'll speak on the government, because time and time again, it's been shocking to me that certain organizations are given funding, and the funding to me is misplaced, because there are real organizations that are actually showing impact, and that's who the money should be given to, number one. Number two, I'm a very young nonprofit. I started my nonprofit. I conceived it in 2020. I became a nonprofit in 2022. And I've been told that I've created more impact in my under 2 years than most organizations. And I think the reason for that is that I was one of those women. You know, I was the woman who divorced at an early age, was on welfare, couldn't get work, dropped out of university, worked my way up to the corporate ladder and was making at one point almost 200,000 a year. Switched my direction for my career, and coming out of a career where I was always in token, I now came into a career where I wasn't being discriminated because of my skin, but because I had a vagina. So we have to really talk about, like, we can, if you haven't lived it, then you're not going to really feel it and understand it. And I think that there's more work to do, and we need to be more expansive. We need to take, you know, this is A and we want to get to B, and we need to make that straight line. We cannot just keep doing this to get to B. So.
Thank you. Actually, thank you for a number of things. And I'm eating up time here too much. I'm going to go really quick. So thank you for a number of things and for raising up. There is a variety of not perspectives, experiences, you know, out there, and I'm glad that the organizers of this panel was able to bring together those very notable perspectives so we could raise that discussion here. So thank you to each one panelist for that perspective to bringing out. And I think you know, that a reminder too, that as we hear people talk about experiences and examples, that there's not the imagining that that will become the monolithic story, right? And what we're able to share, I hope, in these conversations is these are experiences and these are stories that are occurring. Then, and also before I kind of go to Katrina and Lavinia, maybe to say something in terms of the aspects of mentoring that's came up a few times, and we can see maybe the different kind of aspects of that. But to also mention before we go into that topic is that the other thing, that what is happening in the world, I mean, is there's something happening in a broader ways that we've heard about here, like access to employment, access to economic security, all those kind of social determinants of health are involved in here too. When they're happening in the society generally, if I say it that way, they're disproportionately impacting our communities. They're disproportionately impacting us in terms of race as a Black person, gender as a woman, you know, and we experience those in different ways in terms of the way that they impact us. So all of those are kind of the realities that are happening. But what I've noticed in terms of the opportunity to read a bit and to know a bit from both Lavinia and Katrina is, you know, a particular approach and aspects that relate to mentoring. So maybe Lavinia, I'll start with you to make some commentary on the mentoring, and then we'll pass it over to Katrina.
Yeah, I think the mentoring is very important as it relates to the youth. I mean, for me, I can speak again to my own experience. Like, it's because I had fantastic mentoring that I was able to, you know, navigate systems the way I was and ultimately get to the place that I'm at right now. Also seeing that leadership that looks like myself. So while there are quite a few different professionals, you know, of all races, of all genders, that I've worked with, it was really other Black women who really poured into me and really saw the leader in me that was growing and nurtured it and continue to nurture it to this day. And so I think as, you know, women leaders in nonprofits, we really need to kind of pay that back and ensure that we're doing the same for the next generation coming forward. So, you know, oftentimes, like, we're busy, right? We've got families. Some of us have aging parents, children, the sandwich generation, so to speak, and everybody needs something at some point. But I think it's really important to just carve out that space for the youth, especially if they're showing that they want to be a part of, something greater as it relates to nonprofits. Another thing that I think is fantastic is being able to help people see resources when they might not necessarily be able to see it themselves. So while social media is amazing for entertainment, it's also amazing for getting the message out there as it relates to nonprofits and the work that we do, and really galvanizing support across the entire world. I think we're in a really cool time right now. We're doing it right now, just sitting here on video, everyone in their respective places being able to have a real-time conversation. And so, being able to have that mentorship to anyone who reaches out. So I'm quite active on LinkedIn now, and I'm noticing that there are quite a few people, not even only in Canada, but like in the US, some in the Caribbean, who are really looking to come to Canada and to work in leadership roles in nonprofit. So there's that. I also think that making yourself available to different groups and organizations can be useful as well. So in law, we have something called Black Law Students Association of Canada. They've got an annual moot called the Julius Isaac Alexander Moot. And so during that moot, what we do is give back to the profession, like making sure that there's a safe space for our Black law students to land as it relates to making their mistakes in those mooting court competitions. So, for nonprofits specifically, I think also making sure that when you are mentoring people, it's a fulsome experience. So it's not just about, the skills related to communication and organization and productivity and really moving an organization forward, but also conversations about funding and like how to deal with your funders, how to deal with your board, how to properly manage those funds. Because for a lot of people, it could be a lot of money that they've never necessarily had to budget and work around before. And now all of a sudden in these roles, you're being granted so much money, and that money has to be accounted for. So as it relates to the government and the oversight bodies. So I think for me, I think the takeaway point for all of this is that just making yourself available, like as much as life is super busy and, there's things that are taking attention, it really is important to carve out that time. And for me, what that looks like is being really married to my calendar, a little too married to it sometimes, but making sure that there is that access. There's even a block. There's a block there just for mentorship, and it's in a special color, like it's blue. And whenever I don't see enough blue on my calendar, I'm like, okay, I haven't mentored anybody this week. I have to give back, because this is the only way we're going to see our excellence in the next generation. And I think that's really important. I see other communities making sure that they have some type of a succession plan for their leadership in Canada and outside of Canada. I think it's incumbent on us that we do the same thing. And, I'm one of those people, I think action is better than suggestions. And so that's something that I have incorporated into my own practice.
Thank you. Karine?
I think that both are important, but I think Natasha's point is something that we can't ignore either. There is also the component of fragmentation and the problem of infrastructure. These two go hand in hand. We are fragmented when it comes to nonprofits. So like we say in the Haitian, union fait la force, unity does create force. So collaboration is an important topic, and something that we should look into improving. And when I think of leadership, I don't think of leadership in terms of status. I think of it in terms of impact. What I've seen and what I've practiced myself is grounded in community first and well-being, wellness centered and intersectionality approach in leadership. That's my approach. So first, we need to redefine, like I said earlier, on what leadership is in our own terms and what does it mean. And that is a positionality in which you are placed in. So depending on and like for me, it's academia. For other people, it's different. They're different sectors. So of course, your leadership role will shift and the needs of the audience shift accordingly. But that doesn't omit our presence and our impact within our communities. This means resisting the pressure to conform to Eurocentric or capitalist definitions of success. I don't really have, like I say, the titles. I have lists of awards and all that. I purposely sometimes omit them because I want the action to go above what I'm being recognized for in terms of awards. So instead of building models rooted in collaboration, care, and accountability, no, we should be building models rooted on collaboration, care, and accountability. Mentorship, peer networks, a critical lens, not only as a space of knowledge sharing, but also as affirming protective circles. As Lavinia mentioned, safe space is super important. A lot of people within academia or the fields, when they finish whatever they're doing, they need a sort of stepping stone that it might not be necessarily equipped for. And this is mentorship does play a role. And it's you have to kind of share the space in which you have occupied, and also you have work to obtain. So that's mentorship and the exchanging in spaces. So knowledge sharing, but affirming is important. Another key strategy is embodied resistance. This means listening to our bodies, taking rest seriously, creating boundaries. Rest is not a reward. It's a form of resistance in the system in which benefits from our exhaustion, actually. We also need to engage in collaboration, like I mentioned earlier, coalition of building across movements. So that's why I said what Natasha mentioned is something that we should look into when we are in leadership roles. How can we collaboratively engage together and not just isolate our own nonprofit organization and focus on that? We have to expand out. When we align with others facing systematic marginalized, such as indigenous leaders, disabled activists, queer, trans folks, we build collective powers that can challenge institutional norms and create more holistic pathways to change. Loretta Ross makes a comment about calling out to call in. So I think it's something that we should keep in mind. The basis of all the work that we do is to create equal opportunities to resources. That's the foundation of, I think, anybody that's in their leadership role, is to ensure that we provide space and equal opportunities to everyone. And we all aware that systematically we've been disproportionately more on the marginalized lens, but that can be overcome as well.
Thank you both very much. I do want to acknowledge that if folks have, if you have links to something that you're recommending and stuff, feel free to drop those in the chat. Natasha, thank you for that. I noticed, and we're having some great engagement from folks who are attending. You've really got the vibe going. Everybody's into it, so thank you for that. I'm watching the time, and we're doing relatively great, but there's still so many things that we want to kind of hold. So I maybe wanted to go back to the side there, maybe around well-being and what our contribution of energy is. I think that people talked about in terms of the work. And so maybe I would invite Rosemary and Natasha just to talk about from the perspective, of course, of leading organizations, and what strategies can you continue to draw upon for kind of well-being, and particularly maybe in the spaces where you're needing to be in spaces like in government areas to access funding, and kind of the energy that you need to hold that in, and then maybe something as well around any recommendations, ideas about being able to advocate and agitate for appropriate funding. So maybe Rosemary, I'll invite you to start in that conversation for us.
Thank you very much. I was having a conversation with a colleague the other day, or of another organization, and they said, my gosh, things are just so crazy. I don't know how you do it. I see you all over. And I said, I sleep when the baby sleeps. And he looked at me and he said, oh my gosh, okay, so that's wonderful. Congratulations. I didn't realize, I didn't see the pregnancy. And basically, and I had to laugh and step back and say, no, I'm talking baby, the TCBN is the baby. So, just like Natasha, like talked about just so like, passionately and eloquently and just, telling the truth, this economy and this construction industry in general is just, so complex. There's just so much work that we need to do, and we cannot sleep at the wheel. And that's why you need to have those support systems in place to make sure that, whether it's your board, your partners, your staff, your volunteers, the participants in your program can actually take care of their well-being. It's very, very important to us, and mentorship is so huge. But at the other end of the work the thing is, we have to be able to stand up and fight and to push to create the change that we want to see. And really together we are going to be so much stronger, and we have to take care of our well-being. And that's why we use the platform for community benefits to negotiate agreements, because if we waited for government to trickle down funds to us as a not-for-profit organization, or to the people to get jobs, whether it's the employment agencies that are out there who can help you to find jobs where the jobs are, we're going to be behind the 8 ball, right? We have to be out front advocating and pushing. And we use the process of negotiating community benefits agreements because we know that government is spending our taxpayer dollars in areas that there's $150 billion worth of spending that is going to be happening on multiple government projects over the next 10 years, right? A lot of that money could be going into social programs and could be going into making sure that there is, that there is a strong and robust economic development agenda for people from underrepresented communities, for Black people and others. But that's not where the government's is mostly focusing our taxpayer dollars. So we have to be out front. We have to be pushing. And so through community benefits agreements, when we see a major construction project that's coming up, like for example, FIFA is coming to Toronto, that's going to be billions of dollars for the economy that is going to be generated. Where is the intentional effort that will say, okay, how much of that will actually be able to be carved out for our communities, for the constituencies that we care about? We have to make sure that we're holding them accountable. And so we've been, as a coalition, watching as this was coming up and going to the places and spaces of decision-making to actually make sure that there's going to be a requirement for community benefits on those projects. And so for FIFA next year, the City of Toronto has designated $20 million set aside for the community, for Black business owners and minority-owned companies, women-owned companies, including nonprofit and social enterprises. Are we going to be able to be ready to take up those opportunities, to know that they exist and to actually go after them? There is the high-speed rail that's coming very, very soon. Right now, it's being built at $60 to $70 billion. We know it's going to reach $200 billion. It's coming from Montreal, Quebec, Trois-Rivières, over to Kingston, Ottawa, over to Toronto. Are we focused on those opportunities that are coming and where our taxpayer dollars are going to go? We know that right now, with this tariff wars that's happening, our government has decided that investment and doubling down on infrastructure is what's going to be able to keep Canadians above the fray. So expect that more of your money, our money, will be going in this in building infrastructure. How do we make sure that they are laser focused on making sure that there's community benefits and social procurement requirements, and that there's workforce development requirements that are happening? But we can't do it individually as just organizations. We have to come together as a collective to be able to pay attention to what's coming and coordinate ourselves and stand with each other to advocate at all the right places of decision-making to be able to carve out those opportunities, for our people. And so that is hard and heavy work. that needs to happen. We need to be able to do it together, and we need to make sure that we're focused also on our health and well-being, in being prepared to be able to take up those opportunities. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, thank you. For sure. Natasha, I would invite you to come in as well. Just talk about that intersect between, the wellness piece that we've been talking a bit about here in leadership. And I know that there's been some questions in the chat around idea generation in terms of government funding and support. So,
Mhm. So in my experience, I'm a kind of sing for your supper kind of gal. And when, you know, the participants it's what matters. And I noticed coming into the nonprofit that what a lot of nonprofits struggled with, even before they got their program up, was participants and having participants. And fortunate for me, that hasn't been an issue. And so Sing for Your Supper basically means that as an organization, we can only do so much. We can, kiss the babies, we can be out there lobbying and do this, but really, what the government and politicians, they seem to listen to are their constituents. And who are their constituents? Those are the participants. So I think that as much as it's um, our goal and our sort of mandate as organizations to help and to go out there and get that money and so that the programs can flourish. I think we need to also draw on the participants. Um, they want this. They need it. It's a need that they have, and we should be putting them to work. Getting them to contact government, getting them to contact their MPs to talk about their organizations, the ones that are helping them, the ones that need to be out there more. I can tell you that I have an amazing following of very strong women, almost 1,000 of them, and they come to me every day. Natasha, I'm not working. I went to bed without food today. I'm living here or I'm living there. And what I say to them is, well, do the work that I'm doing. I didn't wake up one morning and just own a company. I didn't wake up one morning and just start this nonprofit. It took a lot of work, a lot of my personal time and passion. I can tell you right now, 7 people on my team. And when I started this, I had 3 people on my team. And so we've got to put some of these participants to work because we're doing this for them. And the larger in the group, the better. And you'll find that when you have more people, then the mental capacity of your own self being, the leader, the weight is lifted. We can talk about, the support system, but we don't often look at the participants and the people that we're servicing and being in service of as people that we can also lean on. They're stronger than you think. Some of these women are going through things that you couldn't possibly imagine, and they're looking for a way out, and they'll do almost anything to get that way out. So that's one of the ideas that I have for sure. And you'll see that, big thing for me is employment. Employment and unions. Nobody likes to talk about this because you don't want to ruffle any feathers, but I was born to ruffle feathers. So here we go. When we talk about education, we need to educate the employers. If I can still have a teacher from one of the reputable colleges calling me and telling me that she spoke to a very reputable and well-known organization who she was trying to get a co-op employment for one of her women students, and they say, well, women are not supposed to, we don't hire women because they're not strong enough. And yes, I've had 2 organizations that have told me that this has happened when calling employers. We really need to hold employers accountable for their decision making from an HR perspective. I'm not going to even bring up DEI because I find that word to be super ridiculous, just because these are things that we should be doing anyways, and the world needs to work. We don't have, a concept of, let's do a concept of DEI and everybody inclusion. This is how it should just be. And how do we get to that? The question we should be asking ourselves and asking the employers is, how do we get to that? How do we get to more inclusion? How do we make people feel wanted? Why aren't you hiring? Why is there only 4% of women in the workforce for construction, 12% overall? And why are we there? These are the questions we need to ask them. We need to ask the unions, how long will it take, when somebody's on a list, and waiting on that list, and maybe they're not going to get that job because, well, there are other people that are maybe whiter than them, or there may be, have more seniority, and there's people that aren't being given opportunities, but they're giving money every month and not seeing anything, and they don't have the money, they don't have benefits. There are many things that they don't have, yet these are the same organizations that are given money, millions of dollars, and we don't see that pendulum moving. So I feel like, again, just like, hi, wake up call. I can be that wake up call. I don't mind, to say that the mental state that founders find themselves in is because of the fact that they're on this treadmill, right? So educating employers, really making that connection and having people be held accountable is important, and really drawing upon your participants. Sing for your supper. I don't sit with my participants when they come and tell me these things and say, hey, listen, oh my gosh, let me take out my, we're all having these things that are happening to us. But if we don't get together and we don't speak up, then nothing is going to change. And from, you could say, I've had many people say, well, I'm just one person. Yeah, imagine you times that by 1,000, and everybody's being called by these 1,000 women. And what do you get? You get movement, right? So that's my thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I've heard some amazing phrases there. I think we should have been collecting phrases, sing for your supper, kind of all the ones that we've heard, and really very appreciative of each panelist here who has spoken with passion and heart and with knowledge. And we're getting ready to move to wrap up. I can't believe the time has all gone with that way. But I do have a little quote that I want to read right quick. And while I'm doing that, maybe I can have folks think about what is a kind of a pearl kind of call to action statement you would leave us with in this go around before we're totally ended with the audience today. But when I was hearing us talk about who are our roles in terms of leadership, I don't know if people are familiar with this book called "It's the Bridge." This bridge called my back, and there's just a piece in here that's around voice. And then once I read this, and then maybe we could start the way we begin, go the order as when we began, and people could just, like I said, give us that pearl of a call to action or a way to be, and put that in the chat as well as say it. But so here's the quote. We need to raise our voices a little more, even as they say to us, this is an uncharacteristic you. To finally recognize our own invisibility is to finally be on the path towards visibility. Invisibility is not a natural state for anyone. So we want to be seen, our issues are going to be seen, the way we are addressed them is going to be visible. And what I heard very strongly is, we're in this together, collectively, we'll move forward. So thank you so much. And so as we began, Karine, would you start us off?
I said a couple quotes, so I can repeat some of them. I said, leadership is not about status, it's about impact. But I think that we should also mention the fact that it's possible to institutionalize our values. And I think that's, I've done it. I've rewritten the collective agreement for I'm part of a union. I was the chief negotiator for them for 8 years. And I included my values in the process. I included recognition for racism, recognition for specific training, the way the hiring practices were done, we rewrote that. So it's possible to create systematic change when we are placed in these contexts. And institutionalizing our values for decision-making, how measuring disciplines are made, and so forth, is a form of resistance. And it's a form of recognition of barriers that do exist within certain institutions. So I'll just leave it as that to give everybody else a chance to speak.
Thank you. Lavinia.
Yeah, I would say part of leadership in nonprofits is being the change you wish to see. So we do have quite a few advocates, people who have very strong opinions on the way things should be. And I think it really goes a long way to just, take the horse by the reins and lead in the direction that you want to lead. I think social media makes that very easy now, in the sense of being able to throw up a YouTube channel or a TikTok or an Instagram or be on LinkedIn and have a newsletter, or, do all of the above and have your own website. So I think that like the barriers or the challenges that were in the past, in the sense of like not having access to a platform, have completely melted away. I think social media is that platform for everyone. And so, yeah, being the change that you wish to see, I think goes a very long way in terms of just organizing oneself to hit those goals and those things that we want to see in the future come to fruition.
Thank you. Rosemary.
Yeah, I want to highlight Majora Carter out of the South Bronx, an incredible, leader, community leader. Her quote from her book is, "You shouldn't have to leave your neighborhood to live in a better one," and that really resonates with me, and why I just believe so much in the work that we're doing at TCBN and through community benefits. Together we can build inclusive and resilient communities. And so I'm going to throw out a very selfish request for everybody. If you know a person, including all you who are on this call today, who are leading in incredible ways and building their neighborhoods and building their communities across Canada, please nominate them for the Building Diversity Awards.
Thank you. Natasha.
I have my own quote, pioneer to the death. Yeah. So that means to me that we all need to be pioneers, every single one of us, because that's how things get done. It's so important that we do that for so many reasons. You guys all know what the word pioneer means, and so I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Deep appreciation to everyone here. Appreciation as well to those who have joined us online, and for the full engagement that I've seen through the chats and certainly in this dialogue. I do want to let folks that coming up, our next fireside chat will be focusing next Sunday. We'll be focusing on social media trends with a particular emphasis on AI. So once again, thank you to everyone. Thank you to 100 ABC Women for hosting and organizing these ongoing chats.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. you see, standing